So we're back.
We're back.
Hey, what's going on? Welcome to the Born to Fly Law School video series. This video will be reflecting on the periodic review and study in your while you're in law school, the do's and don'ts and definition of commercial outlines, and the PP, or as that stands for Professor Profile, and that's going to be very important. I can't wait to get into it. So we have again Emmanuel Obi, attorney, the writer of Born to Fly. Let's get right into it with the periodic review and study. So, if I didn't study in undergrad, I know we touched on this, but I'll just ask it again for the audience. If I didn't study in undergrad, I just waited, put everything off. I had my fun, had my parties, had my frat parties, had my my go-to and my friends and everything, and just kind of studied for the final exam the day before. I still had a high GPA. And what am I going to have to change in law school?
Yeah. I think that's a good question, Mel. And one of the things, and just to kind of set the stage for everybody, one of the things that we're talking about now, we're talking about the nitty-gritty of exam prep, right? We're talking about what you need to do and the things that's going to separate you from catching the curve and riding the curve of mediocrity, or again, finding your law school wings and soaring to the heights of the class.
That's right.
And so you absolutely will have to change from your undergrad routine. I was much like you. I was the guy that could literally blow off the entire semester, but you give me 2 solid days before the exam of focused cramming,
Right.
And I could go in and I could make an A in the class, and I did relatively well.
Right.
That strategy in law school is going to cause you to literally lose your mind. And in this, I'm not trying to be funny. I'm not trying to make jokes, but I have literally seen folks in the library during finals time, just in a period of just extreme stress and emotional breakdowns, because the realization of just how much material you've covered. It's easy when you're going to class and you're talking about cases and you're taking some notes and you're thinking, oh, this is great. But then you look back at the end of the semester and you've got all this work times 5 or 6.
Right.
So yeah, absolutely, without a doubt, you're going to have to change your study habits, and you're going to have to study and review a lot quicker than you did in undergrad.
Okay. You talk about the curve. Well, what exactly is the curve? Like the law school curve that everyone has been talking about.
Yeah, the curve is just that. I mean, most people are familiar with it in some of their classes in undergrad, because some classes had a forced curve situation where there was some sort of required distribution. But the curve is just that the academic phenomenon that you have in a lot of programs, law school in particular, where there is a certain distribution that has to happen, within the class. Which means what? The bottom line of it is that not everybody is going to get an A. In undergrad, everybody had the opportunity to get an A because you weren't being graded relative to each other. And so you and I could go in and take an exam, and we both could get an A. We literally both could get an A in that class. In law school, that's not the same possibility. In law school, you and I will take an exam, and the professor will read my answer and say, that's a pretty good answer. I'm going to give him a B+. And then the professor will read your answer and say, man, Mel really nailed this. He gave me some policy here. He gave me the minority rule. He talked about these other facts. He talked about how this fact may relate into this. He gave me, his structure was really nice. He used headings. I could read this. I mean, I'm just sitting here sipping on my glass of wine, just reading his exam like a novel. Meanwhile, Emmanuel's was a little hard to get through. He didn't really use headings. He didn't really give me any policy. His structure was a little off. So you know what? Mel gets the A. Mel sets the standard. So the forced curve situation is a reality that you will always be graded comparative to somebody else, comparative to others in your class.
Right.
And that's a huge thing for folks to understand early on.
Okay. So, I mean, obviously the goal is top of the class, the Born to Fly in the legal profession. What's a suggested approach to retaining such vast quantities of information? I know we've covered this subject multiple times, but just it must be important.
Yeah, no, it's huge. It's huge, and I think it really goes down to a lot of the things that we've talked about in previous videos. I mean, it goes back to the day-to-day basics, making sure that as you're reading through the cases, you're making it, you're not just kind of mindlessly reading through the cases. You're systematically asking yourself, why is this case here? Why am I reading this case? How am I going to use this case on the exam? How does this case fit into to all the other material, right? Then you have to have your outlining process, which is a huge part of it. You're going through and you're systematically synthesizing, personalizing, to prepare yourself to be able to analyze, right? And be able to develop the analyzing skills that you need. And then, as you get closer and closer to finals, you're revving up and you're increasing your review. You're increasing your level of actual purposeful preparation for the exam. So yeah, so I mean, you just got to stay on top of it. There's no way to get around that.
Stay on top of it daily, weekly, monthly, topically.
That's right.
As we've been covering throughout this series.
That's right.
So let's move more toward the commercial outlines. Now, what is a commercial outline?
A commercial outline, as I mentioned in my last video, there is $1 billion industry that consists of just all of these various things that law students can buy. They're from commercial outlines to case briefs to narrative summaries to flashcards to tapes. I mean, you name it. There is, again, $1 billion with a B dollar supplement industry out there. And as a student, you will be tempted to, on the first day of school, go in and buy, spend thousands of dollars on these study aids. I did that my first semester. That was a big mistake. Let me tell you why it was a big mistake. One, all of these publications, all these study aids are by other people.
Right.
Okay? They're written by other people, they're developed by other people, and those other people, more often than not, is not going to be your professor. Okay? At the end of the semester, you are taking an exam specifically written by your professor. So it's that person that you need to master. The other thing was that I started to find that for different classes, I needed different types of study aids, right? So for my contracts class, I would prefer study aids that had flowcharts in them so that I can see how the contracts analysis flowed through at the various levels, and that really helped me understand it. For my constitutional law class, I really needed a resource like Chermensky, who writes one of the most famous constitutional law horn books, as they're called. And the reason why I needed that was because I needed something that gave me a narrative context that really went into explaining the case law and the evolution and the decisions, and really broke it down in a narrative form, not really visually. And I didn't know that at the beginning, so you really should wait until a few weeks into the class to get a sense of what am I going to need in this class?
Right.
What type of support am I going to need? And then you buy the commercial outlines or things like that. That's the first point. Second point, and I can't stress this enough. Now, I can't stress this enough. If I find out or hear that you are overly relying on commercial outlines, I'm going to personally get in my car and drive down to wherever your dorm room on campus, and I'm going to find the commercial outlines and I'm going to publicly burn them. Okay, all right, because the one thing that you can do that will detrimentally just really put you in a bad place is to start over relying on commercial outlines. Especially if you're one of those folks that says, man, I've got a 200-page outline by Steve Emanuel. Why am I going to spend any time doing my outline? Again, Steve Emanuel is not your professor. Exactly. Steve Emanuel is not going to be reading your exam at the end of the semester. So he doesn't care about, your professor doesn't care about your mastery of what's in a commercial outline. The other thing to keep in mind is that a commercial outline is done in a very universal form. So it's going to cover the full gamut and the full spectrum of the legal issues for that particular class. But your professor may only focus on a specific subset, or may have a different perspective, or may limit the scope of material that they cover. So you got to be careful with that.
Yeah, I feel you. So we're really trying to tailor our mindset or our exam preparation to what the professor wants.
That's right.
Like I say, the professor's writing the exam. People that in these commercial outlines, this is one of the don'ts of the commercial outlines, they're not writing my exam. Just to repeat what you said. Is that how we get into this this concept of the professor profile.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. You know, when a few sessions ago, when you and I were, I think very early on in our discussions, I was talking about how you got to get real strategic about your professor profile. Now, in law school, a lot of people thought that again that I was off, going bananas, and then I was just doing too much, as a lot of people said. But I think it's very, very important, and I encourage everybody at the very beginning of the semester to start to develop what I call the professor profile. And that is really starting to understand who your professor is. And for me, again, some people may think this is extreme, some people may think this is going overboard, but I'm giving you guys tips and tools that help me graduate and do very well in law school. And so I'm just sharing with you what I find was helpful, so you do with it what you will. But at the beginning of every semester, I would create a binder, and the binder would be where I would start developing my professor profiles for all of my professors. The way that I would start off is I would print out their bio from the school website, and then I would do a Google search on them and just kind of see what pops up about them. Just really, again, I'm not advocating any stalking activities. Please do not call me if you get arrested. Do not follow these professors. Do not camp out in front of their houses. Don't do anything like that. I'm talking about professor profile within the realm of reasonable and non-stalker-like activity, okay? But you do a Google search on them, you find out what pops up. Have they done any interviews? Have they written any articles? Have they published anything? You get a sense of them. Have they always been in academia, or did they practice before? Are they younger, or are they older? Are they tenured, or are they not tenured? What articles have they written recently? What law review articles have they written, especially as it relates to your topic matter?
Right.
If you find articles written by your professor that deal with issues that they're teaching, you better read those articles, right? And so I would gather all that information, and then I would literally go and meet with the professor. I would do it very early in the semester. And not doing it in like a cheesy, teacher's pet kind of way, but doing it from the standpoint of, again, getting additional intel for your professor profile. So I'd go very early in the semester and I'd meet them. Hey, Professor so-and-so, I'm Emmanuel Obi, I'm in your class. I'm looking forward to it. I've read a lot about you. Can you please tell me, what it takes to be successful in your class?
Right.
Can you please tell me what you see students, where do you see students going wrong in your class years and years? I'm really nervous about this law school process, and I really want to do well and live up to the standards that I know that you're going to have. Right. And you will be surprised that there will be a treasure trove of information that they will give you. They'll give you information about how to prepare. They'll give you information about legal issues that kids struggle with. They'll give you information about exam prep. And then you also want to systematically meet with your professor during the year, before finals time. Right?
Yeah.
Because what you're doing is you're developing a relationship with them. And a relationship not just for the purpose of trying to glean exam prep, but at some point you may need recommendations for something if you're going to do a clerkship or whatever. And you want to develop a relationship with them so when you go to them during finals time, they know that you're legitimately seeking help and that you have consistently been seeking help and seeking information and meeting with them. And it's just going to put you in a much better light as they're concerned.
Right.
So just to recap, professor profile is absolutely critical. It's a way that you get into, you try to get into the mind of your professor and try to understand what makes them click, what makes them tick, get a sense of what issues they value or what issues they think are important in the class. And there's no way that, again, I think you can make a good grade in law school without having some good grasp of who your professor is and what they're going to want from you.
That's true. And I like when you mentioned get a jump on it, because I can only imagine the lines outside of professors' doors, because the open door policy, during final exam times, and yeah, you want to set that relationship early. So like you said, legitimate interest and everything. But
Oh yeah, and one final point on that. The other thing that I'll tell you that I think is a tip too is, especially if you're going to be working with a study group, is to schedule regular office times for the rest of the semester.
Okay.
Like one thing that my study group and I would do often is we would get together and then we would schedule our professor office hour times for the entire year.
There you go.
Right? We would block out times, 5 or 6 times for the entire year that we would meet with them. And we would do that because of that very dynamic, because around finals time, professors get very, very popular.
Yeah. Popular and irritated.
Yeah, no, very much so, very much so. So,
But yeah, all right. So well, that brings this video to a close. We'll hit you up with our next video, which is actually going to be our last video of the series, and we finally hit exam preparation. So we'll see you in the next video, and thanks a lot.
all right, see you guys.